If you tried to fly out of a major American airport in March of 2026, you likely hit a wall of humanity. Passengers found themselves trapped in security lines stretching through terminals and across multiple floors, with average wait times creeping past 4.5 hours at hubs like Houston and Atlanta. The system buckled because the workforce vanished. Over 480 Transportation Security Administration officers quit entirely. At specific airports, absentee rates hit 50% as officers simply stopped showing up to work. To mitigate the crowds, the White House ordered a desperate patch. They deployed tactical officers from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, to assist at 14 major airports. Specifically, these were agents from ICE's enforcement and removal operations, the division usually tasked with deportations, now relegated to directing frustrated travelers and loading plastic bins. While the rest of the federal government, from the Pentagon to the national parks, retained its full budget, Congress applied a surgical defunding specifically to the Department of Homeland Security. The gridlock at security checkpoints represents a calculated casualty of a political standoff playing out thousands of miles away in Washington. To see how we got here, we have to rewind to January 2026. Congress was moving through a relatively routine process to finalize the year's federal budget, but a fatal encounter in Minneapolis derailed the negotiations. A United States citizen named Alex Preddy was killed by federal agents operating under Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, which is the largest law enforcement agency within the Department of Homeland Security. The shooting sent immediate shockwaves through the Capitol. Senate Democrats, led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, announced a total blockade of the pending funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security. They presented a strict list of non-negotiable operational reforms for both ICE and CBP. The demands included judicial warrants, mandatory body cameras, and a strict ban on masks. This ultimatum created a mechanical split in the budget process. In late January, Congress successfully passed a package to fund the rest of the federal government, but they intentionally left the Department of Homeland Security on a short-term extension, allowing its funding to completely expire on February 14th. In a few short weeks, a localized demand for police accountability in Minnesota effectively severed the financial lifeline for the entire American Homeland Security apparatus. As the February 14th deadline passed, Republican leadership, helmed by Senate Majority Leader John Thune, outright refused to accept the Democratic reform package. This diagram shows the total DHS budget. Republicans proposed funding the massive 94% block, while withholding funds for the 6% slice representing ICE's enforcement and removal operations. Democrats rejected this workaround, arguing that passing it still funds agencies like Customs and Border Protection without enacting required reforms. The deadlock persisted because of a core procedural hurdle in the Senate, known as the filibuster. This rule requires a 60-vote supermajority to advance almost any piece of legislation, meaning neither party could force a bill through on their own. To bypass the filibuster, Republicans looked to a legislative maneuver called budget reconciliation. Reconciliation is a complex parliamentary rule that allows certain financial bills to pass with a simple majority of just 51 votes. Then, the White House threw a complicating curveball. President Trump demanded that any reconciliation deal must also include the Save America Act, a bill requiring strict photo identification to vote in federal elections. This created immediate friction. Even staunchly conservative lawmakers publicly doubted whether attaching a voter ID law to a budget reconciliation bill was legally permissible under the Senate's strict parliamentary rules. A singular demand for police accountability in Minnesota had mutated. It was now an intractable, multi-layered hostage situation, tangling together 60-vote filibusters, obscure budget loopholes, and unrelated federal election laws. Inside the Capitol, the negotiations remained abstract and completely static. Outside, the tangible failures were rapidly compounding for the essential workers caught in the middle. The damage extended far beyond the airport security lines. The Department of Homeland Security suspended processing for global entry, the trusted traveler program used by millions. Meanwhile, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, was forced to halt all of its non-disaster operations. The financial toll on the unpaid workforce grew devastating. TSA agents missed consecutive full paychecks. According to congressional testimony from the acting TSA administrator, employees resorted to sleeping in their cars and selling their own blood plasma just to make ends meet.
The emergency mitigation strategy created a deep structural irony. The untrained ICE agents deployed to the airports to help manage the crowds were still receiving their paychecks. The certified TSA professionals who had to teach them how to load the bins and check the documents were working for free. Throughout the crisis, DHS leadership maintained a highly combative posture. Early figureheads like Secretary Kristi Noem publicly accused lawmakers of intentionally endangering national security before she was ultimately replaced. When lawmakers weaponize the basic funding mechanisms of government to force ideological policy changes, the ultimate price is paid by the unpaid essential workers and the everyday citizens caught in the crossfire.